Whether it's cars, comics, video games, or violins, there's a little geek in all of us. It's time to give your geek a voice. It's time for Geek Therapy. Here's your host, Johnny Hamburger.
Hold on, dude. I'm gonna have to call you back. I gotta do my show. So, let me call you back in the commercials. It'll be about 10 minutes. All right? Thanks, man. Welcome to Geek Therapy Radio. I'm Johnny Hamburger, as always, as every week, unless I'm joined by a guest. I'm Johnny Hamburger, your mental curator for the evening. And the keen-eyed viewers on the YouTube might notice a degradation in video quality. And I'm doing that for this first segment to prove a point, because I hope laptop makers are paying attention to this. I hope they see this video and somebody thinks, why aren't we doing that? What I'm getting at is this. I'm using the built-in webcam of my laptop. Okay? And it looks crappy. This laptop, all truth be told, probably cost over $1,200. I'll just be real with you. It's an MSI GS43 VR. It's an awesome laptop in every single way. It is amazing, except for this webcam. It's garbage. It is garbage. And that's my point. If you're spending $1,200 on a laptop, it should have an awesome camera in it. You know why? Because that phone in your pocket has an amazing camera in it. That camera is tiny, it fits inside your phone innocuously and takes up no space, and they could easily put it where your webcam goes on your laptop. There is no excuse for a laptop that cost over $1,000. Really, there's no excuse for a laptop that cost over $500 to have nothing but the best camera in it. The same exact camera they use in the back of smartphones, those amazing cameras, just put them in a laptop. You are paying so much money for your computer, for your laptop. It makes no sense why the webcam is so garbage. So for this first segment, I'm recording the entire segment with my laptop's webcam to prove that point. I am not using the built-in microphone in the laptop. I will not do that to my listeners. I will not do that to my YouTube viewers. I will not do that to my podcast listeners. No, I'm not going to do that to you. What I'm using is my Samsung Meteor mic. This is just an awesome little microphone for recording in the field, for recording on the go. It's just a good little microphone all around, and I think you can get them on Amazon for around $70. In fact, I just ordered another one so that when I go to record the show in the field or on location, I have a good microphone set up, and you really can't go wrong with a Samsung Meteor mic or any USB condenser mic for that point. Samsung isn't sponsoring this show. Samsung doesn't sponsor me. Samsung is not sponsoring my YouTube channel or anything like that, any of my podcast. It's just, I gotta recommend what I've spent my own money on, unless that thing sucks. I'm not gonna recommend stuff that I've spent money on that I regret. So, with that, Samsung Meteor mic is a good USB microphone. And laptop makers, stop putting garbage cameras in your laptops. Put the same cameras that you find in smartphones, because those cameras are awesome and there's no reason why they can't fit or be put inside of $1,000 laptops. No excuse. Get on it. Make good cameras or put good cameras in laptops. Let's get on to actual geeky stuff. But you know what? Actually, I'm not the first geek to think that. There's no way I'm the first geek to think, why aren't laptop cameras better? Why aren't webcams built into laptops better? So I'm just the first one saying it publicly that I know of. And I follow quite a few tech guys on YouTube and social media and whatnot, and I've not heard anybody mention that. You ever wonder why the camera on your cell phone is so amazing? It can shoot 4K videos and take these amazingly detailed images at super high resolutions. Images that would have not even been an engineer's dream 10 years ago. Straight up fact. There's no way anyone anticipated cameras on smartphones, cameras on cell phones becoming any more than a novelty. And now cameras on smartphones have replaced those little digital cameras, those little digital point and shoot cameras. They have cut into that market share dramatically. So you think about the camera in your phone. It's an amazing camera. Why are the backup cameras on our cars so terrible? You know what is an even better point? Why are security cameras and surveillance cameras so garbage? You watch on the news and it says look out for this suspect. He just robbed the store, or this guy just murdered somebody, and it shows a grainy, ridiculous image of somebody's blob of a face. Like, is that, you can't even tell, is that a person? That's a basic human form I'm looking at, but it's so low quality, so low resolution. It doesn't make any sense. Why are the cameras on our phones tiny and amazing, except surveillance cameras are horrifically low resolution and low power? That makes no sense. Be on the lookout for this tall white male. Look at his face. I can't see his face. It's all pixels. There's no way to see his face. What the heck is going on? I don't understand why cameras on our phones can be so great, but the cameras on our laptops are trash. Surveillance cameras are trash. And that's all the rant I'm going to do on cameras for this segment. I wanted to touch on something in the last minute or two here in this first segment of Geek Therapy Radio. I should mention, go follow Geek Therapy Radio on Facebook. Go subscribe to Geek Therapy Radio on YouTube. And go follow Geek Therapy Radio also on Instagram. Basically, just Google Geek Therapy Radio and all the social media you see that comes up, and YouTube. Go follow, like, and subscribe. There's an interesting story, and I'm going to bring it up here on my laptop real quick, that I saw in Ars Technica. And it says a most wanted criminal is arrested after posting an Instagram video of himself. What a moron. And there's this guy's face here. I'm not going to repost his face here on this video, on this Geek Therapy, because he doesn't deserve his face to be shown. He doesn't deserve fame. But suffice to say, he's an idiot. And usually people who are criminals, surprise, surprise, are idiots. You hear all the time of people stealing cell phones, people stealing smartphones, and then posting selfies of themselves using the smartphone to social media. And the cops basically just use the geo data from that and arrest the person. Sometimes they're so stupid to say, I just stole this phone. They're literally that dumb. So yeah, hey criminals, stop posting pictures of yourself to social media. You are morons. Then again, keep doing it. Help us weed out the wheat from the chaff of society. So if you're doing something illegal and stupid, by all means, put all your personal business on social media, you dummies. I guess the last thing I'll talk about this segment, I feel like I've been talking fast, and you know why that sucks? Is because I feel like I have an ulcer on the back of my tongue. I bit my tongue in the way back like a couple days ago, and it hurts so bad. It's distracting. And maybe my tempo, to me at least, feels that I'm a little bit offbeat this show, because it's like a soccer player with an injured calf or with an injured thigh, except I can't stop playing. I have to keep doing it. I have to do a radio show. I have to talk. And my muscle is my tongue. So I got to keep using it, and it is distracting. That being said, if you're watching the YouTube, you can see the winces on my face, because this seriously is bad. Linda Hamilton and Arnold Schwarzenegger are coming back to do another Terminator movie. Have I mentioned my uncle on the show? He's a big time geek, and one of his favorite movies of all time is all the Terminators. I like Terminator movies, but I don't know what capacity. I'm not worried about Linda Hamilton. What her role is. I'm worried about Arnold. Terminator is an action movie, and Arnold is getting up there in age now. He's still extremely fit. He's more fit than I'll ever be at whatever age he is and whatever age I will ever be. He is very fit, but something tells me he's not going to do his own stunts. So, more power to him, and I'll see the movie. I'll see this new Terminator, if not for anything that I'm curious how Arnold is going to perform in a new Terminator movie. Ow, my tongue hurts so bad. I'm sorry, YouTube viewers, people viewing the show on YouTube who aren't listening on 950 AM KPRC in Houston, but are watching the YouTube. Or I've got listeners who go and are curious about what my beautiful beaming face looks like. They go onto YouTube and see what I look like. I'm wincing so much. I'm making ugly faces. My tongue hurts. And with that, that's the end of this first segment. I have a feeling the tempo of this show is going to be a little awkward, and it's because I'm injured. I've suffered a life-threatening injury. I bit my tongue a couple days ago. I'll live. More Geek Therapy Radio coming up. Thanks for listening. I'm Johnny Hamburger, your mental curator, Geek Therapy, on all the social media, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Go like, follow, and subscribe to Geek Therapy Radio. Like I said, I'm Johnny Hamburger, and I can't talk! I'm Johnny Hamburger, and we'll be right back in a few minutes. Stick around. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. Johnny Hamburger, still your mental curator for this evening and every evening you spend with GTR. My tongue is still injured. It hasn't healed over the commercial break, and there's certain words that I say that rub that ulcer or inflamed area or whatever it is on the back of my tongue against my back molars, and it hurts so bad, and I did it several times in that last sentence. But enough of my dramas. You know, I'm going through the internet here, looking for stories and looking for things to talk about. I already know what I was going to talk about. Like, I had it pretty well planned out for the past few days now. There are subjects I want to get to. But a story came across, just a quick little blurb of something, which it's the kind of story, I don't want to call it clickbait, but maybe it is, but it's the kind of story that just kind of makes you lower your head and shake your head, both for subject matter and the no-duh nature of it. And I'm just going to mention it real quick, because it's not really my style to delve into sexual matters. Ding, 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 ding. Sexual matters on Geek Therapy Radio. But there's a brief article that went by that said, and let's be real because we're adults here, it said women who are generally not very interested in sex become more interested when they stop mastering their domain. If you remember that Seinfeld episode, these women who have low interest in sex suddenly become more interested in it once they stop taking care of business. Personally, if you catch my drift, and I'm sorry for going there, but this is on a technology website, and I don't understand why it's on a technology website. I even clicked the tab that says science. Well, I guess that makes sense. I'm dumb. That makes sense. I thought it was under a tech tab, but still, why is that story important? Why is that breaking news? Why is that relevant in any way? You know what? It's like saying a dog will act hungry if it hasn't eaten. Well, that's not even a good analogy because a dog always wants to eat. A dog will eat so much that it barfs. which is a good analogy for being promiscuous, I guess. But it's like saying somebody who's thirsty will want more water when they're thirsty. You don't say! All right, off that subject, because that's not really geek therapy. That's a different type of therapy. Oh, what's going on? Has this ulcer gotten to my brain? This tongue ulcer, has it manifested and moved into one of my frontal lobes? Is that why I'm talking about a sexual subject on Geek Therapy Radio? No, it's just because it's on a tech website and that story is stupid. Why? All right, let's get on to something more real that I actually did want to talk about. I wanted to talk about virtual reality for a few minutes. Virtual reality has, I guess, it comes and goes. Like its popularity comes and goes. I remember being in the arcade at Dave & Buster's in the mid 90s, late 90s, and they had a virtual reality like robot game. Basically robots fighting each other. Very low polygon, primitive looking thing, but it was virtual reality. Everyone remembers 3D. Oh my goodness. Oh, I'm blanking out on the name of that. It's going to bug me. Anyway, stereo photography has been around since photography, basically. Taking two images with two lenses about as far apart as the human eye, and then when you look at them both together, individually with each eye, they create a 3D image. Oh, that's going to bug me for the rest of this segment, what the name of that little toy is. And I know there's a bunch of people right now screaming at the radio. It's called the Thing. Oh, I'm dumb. My tongue injury is distracting me. Okay, but more recently, virtual reality in mainstream gaming, mainstream PCs, and even PlayStation has PlayStation VR. You have smartphones touting the capability of playing back virtual reality videos and playing some virtual reality games. You put these goggles on. Google Cardboard's a very popular form of this, and you can go watch YouTube videos in 3D in virtual reality using these goggles. But I'm going to focus more on the gaming aspect. People are probably familiar with, devices like the Oculus Rift, which even back in 2013, when they first released, they were going to different trade shows and displaying the prototype of it. It's come a long way, both in resolution and frame rate. And here's the thing about virtual reality. The resolution needs to be, not only does the resolution per eye need to be very high, but the frame rate also needs to be very high. And you think, playing a normal game at 60 frames per second is high. And it is high. And that's probably the standard. I know a lot of gamers who are way more into gaming than I am would probably argue that 120 hertz, 120 frames per second is where it's at. But here's why frame rate is important for virtual reality. Per eye, hardware needs to be able to display the frames at 90 frames per second per eye. So effectively, that's 180 frames per second. So you need quite beefy hardware and able to push that resolution at that frame rate. If it's below the frame rate, it tends to make people more dizzy, give them more headaches, because real life, when you're trying to simulate real life, there is no actual frame rate that the human eye sees. It's all just one continuous image, ever-changing image coming into our eyes. So you need to replicate that as closely as possible in virtual reality. Not only does the frame rate need to be high, the resolution needs to be high, because the resolution of real life is infinite. And again, if the resolution is low in virtual reality, it can make people sick. It can make people not feel good or be disoriented. So everything has to be perfect with VR. And what I'm really getting at here is what I kind of caught myself off guard thinking about this subject the other day. I thought to myself, well, virtual reality and gaming, it was a flash in the pan. It never amounted to anything. Then I thought, wait a second. It wasn't a flash in the pan. It wasn't popular and then unpopular. What's happening is virtual reality and gaming is taking a long time to develop, as it should, which is a good thing. Just because we're not reading a whole lot about VR and gaming like we were in 2013 and 14, that's just because you haven't seen a lot of articles on it and a lot of stories on it. Doesn't mean it's gone away. It's just been in the background. They have been developing it and working on it and making it better and better and better and better, which is a good thing. Virtual reality is going to pave the way for a lot of new kind of ingenious applications. And I don't mean applications like software applications. I mean like real life applications. For instance, surgeons. What is the machine they use? Basically, they're able to operate on somebody remotely. Like a surgeon in the United States can do a procedure on a patient in Australia. Oh, I think it's called Da Vinci. Is that what it's called? The Da Vinci machine? Called the Da Vinci machine? Anyways, they're basically looking at a monitor and they can basically go and the engineering in this thing is absolutely mind-blowing. It's crazy. But they can suture things, suture up a heart from thousands of miles away, basically controlling the arms of a robot. It's really, really amazing. Now, side note, that being said, would I want a robot doing surgery on me or a real-life human? It's the same thing with airplanes, an autopilot. Do you want the airplane landing itself, which it basically can do? Would you feel safer with no pilot in the cockpit and just the machine landing the plane? Or would you feel safer with an actual pilot in the cockpit? I would feel much safer with an actual pilot in the cockpit. And I feel doubly safe when there's autopilot and a pilot, a real life human being, making real life adjustments and decisions that only humans can make. But anyways, back on track. So gaming VR will pave the way for much newer and more specialized applications outside of gaming. So I'm all for, and I'm very happy that VR and gaming, virtual reality in video games is taking so long to perfect because it's a hard thing to perfect. We're talking about seamlessly transporting a person into virtual reality, of course, but fooling the brain into thinking it's real enough not to distract from the actions you're making in the game. That's why resolution is important. That's why frame rate's important, because if there's even the most minor stutter in frame rate when in virtual reality, it takes you out of it completely. Your brain is no longer fooled to thinking this is real life, because in normal day-to-day life, using our eyes and ears, there are no stutters. There are no dropped frames in real life. So, yeah, again, I was thinking the other day, wow, I haven't heard much about virtual reality. That was a flash in the pan. No, they've just been relatively quietly developing the technology in the background. And that's a really good thing, because I would like the end product. I would like for virtual reality to be perfected. And so kudos to everybody working on VR. My tongue hurts. I got to stop mentioning that. That's the end of this segment. Go follow Geek Therapy Radio on Facebook, Geek Therapy Radio on Instagram, and Geek Therapy Radio on YouTube. Go hit up all that stuff. And geektherapyradio.com. I don't mention that enough. The website, geektherapyradio.com. We'll be back in just a couple minutes. If you're watching on YouTube, it's going to be pretty instant transition. Probably not going to be any commercials. So either way, join me for the next segment of Geek Therapy Radio, and I'll be right back. My name is Johnny Hemberger. Stick around. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. I'm Johnny Hamburger, still your mental curator for this evening and every evening on Geek Therapy Radio. Geek Therapy Radio on YouTube. If you're listening, if you're driving around in your car, or you've got the radio on in your garage, or you're listening on the iHeartRadio app, Geek Therapy Radio is video recorded, and I upload each episode to YouTube, so you can see my beautiful smiling face and any cool little technology that I might happen to have on the show, including this wonderful state-of-the-art pen. It's a Bic. It's hard plastic. And if you want to see this fantastic handwriting device, go to YouTube. All right, let's get on to more geeky subjects. Yes, my tongue still hurts, so that is still distracting. SpaceX, Elon Musk's outfit, does a lot more than I think a lot of people might realize. Yes, they shoot rockets off into space, and Elon Musk is developing Hyperloop, which is a supersonic mode of transportation, although I would say it's not supersonic because it travels in a vacuum, and that's why it can travel at high speeds. But if you're traveling in a vacuum, that means there's no air, which means you can't break the speed of sound because there's no air, and air travels through sound. You're just traveling at a high enough ground speed that if it were... Ouch! Ow! That if it were at sea level in the open, it would be breaking sound. But anyway, SpaceX is filing a patent or a trademark. They're trying to trademark the term Starlink. Starlink, all one word, Starlink. And what it is it's Elon Musk's vision to provide broadband gigabit internet using satellites in the sky, kind of like satellite radio, Sirius FM radio, except for internet, which is a really cool idea because that means you can provide internet access to the entire world. That means you can be at the North Pole or Antarctica or the magnetic North Pole or wherever. You could be at different antipoles of the Earth and never lose internet connection. High speed internet connection. That's an important caveat to mention. High speed. It's not caveat because it's not a drawback. It's a plus. Global high speed internet access. Now I know what my gamer geeks are thinking right now. Satellites? When I play other players, if I'm in Texas and I'm playing a guy from Europe, the latency makes the game unplayable. That's why I only want a game on local servers. And I hear you. I know. When I play Rocket League, which is really the only game that I'm playing these days, when I play Rocket League, I make sure the servers are only Eastern United States and Western United States. I don't even do South America. I don't do Europe. I don't do the Far East, Japan. I don't do... Well, it's really west compared to where I'm at. But yeah, no Asian servers. Not because I'm some sort of elitist or racist, but because you introduce tons of latency once you don't have... or once you introduce a satellite into your internet connection. So, for instance, if I'm here in Texas and I'm going to play a match and I have players against me in Australia, that will be unplayable because there are going to be one or two, at least, satellites in the chain between my computer and my opponent's computer, which means latency is a thing and makes it unplayable. So, SpaceX developing Starlink to provide global high-speed internet access. They're planning on having low latency. It's going to be low latency. How low latency? 25 milliseconds, which is pretty good for online gaming. That's about average for what you get with cable internet. For instance, when I play Rocket League, I'm usually hovering around 50 milliseconds. I'm usually hovering around twice what Starlink proposes to provide. They said they're going to provide 25 milliseconds of latency, which is perfectly playable in online games. I said playable, not perfect. It's not going to be super competitive. There's a reason why in video game tournaments that the machines are physically connected to each other. It's to get that latency down to single-digit latencies. 5 milliseconds. I have seen as good as I've gotten on cable internet, which means I've been playing Rocket League probably with somebody in Houston and maybe locally within a few miles of my neighborhood. Probably I've seen sub 9 millisecond latencies, but I'm perfectly content. I'm honestly perfectly content playing anything below 150 milliseconds latency. And there's a lot of gamers cringing. There's CSGO players right now that are cringing that would just throw their computer into the trash if they had 150 millisecond latency. But to me, that's kind of playable. It's not ideal. I don't like it. And I check the ping and it's at 150 milliseconds and I say, hey, I'll keep going with the match. It's not that bad yet. Latency is important because basically when you press the button on your controller, let's say you're making your guy on the screen jump. Latency is the time between pressing the jump button and the guy on your screen jumping. That's latency. And if it's 25 milliseconds, perceptibly, it's pretty instant. Press the button, the guy jumps immediately when you press the button. That's what 25 seconds is. That's what 50 milliseconds of latency is. Press the button, the person does something. The character does something. When you're at 150 milliseconds, that's over a tenth of a second. So it's like tap jump, tap jump, tap jump, instead of tap jump, tap jump. I know that sounds really stupid to any geeks listening that aren't video gamers, but you know exactly what I'm talking about. Even if you don't play games, you know what I'm talking about when I refer to latency in those terms. So Starlink is going to provide global broadband internet at 25 milliseconds. And how are they going to do this? It's because they will use low Earth orbit satellites, which is kind of important because you want the satellites as close as possible to your antenna. Long story short, they plan to start rolling out these satellites, start launching these satellites into space by the thousands. They'll probably have a few dozen. Well, they probably have they're not going to launch 5,000 satellites up all at once on one rocket. But they are going to launch many satellites at a time per rocket. That's something they can do. Low Earth orbit. And they will have supplementary satellites, geostationary satellites over more heavily populated areas, because there's no reason why, if you're living in New York City, why you should have low latency. So perhaps latency over populated areas will be lower than 25 milliseconds. I'm wondering how it's all going to be integrated. You can't just use a normal Wi-Fi router for this stuff. You're gonna have to have line of sight to the satellite. The reason why your satellite radio goes out when you go through a tunnel or under thick trees is because your antenna doesn't have direct line of sight to the satellite that's over you. So you can't sit with your laptop in your home and have a connection to these satellites. So that's going to be interesting to figure out. You're going to have to put an antenna in your window or put an antenna on your roof or something like that to feed the rest of your house. It's very interesting. But it's very cool to bring global, worldwide broadband internet service to the masses. With that, more Geek Therapy Radio coming up. I'm Johnny Hamburger. Hit all the social media. Just Google Geek Therapy Radio and you'll find it. And we'll be right back for the final segment of Geek Therapy Radio.
I got you stuck off the realness. We be the infamous. We be the infamous.
So, welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. I was so excited about my next subject that I was just going to dive right into it. You're listening to Geek Therapy Radio. My name is Johnny Hamburger still says JH on my underpants. So that means I must be me. So I'm going to jump right into it because I'm super excited about this. And when it first happened, my geek bones were trembling. My geek bones were vibrating, and I was shaking around. Just... Do you like that? You like that sound effect? Rattling around all over the place because Capcom, to celebrate the 30th anniversary of Street Fighter, which I mentioned on a couple shows ago, or was it last show? I forget. Because obviously I'm a huge Street Fighter nerd. Capcom re-released, to celebrate the 30th anniversary of Street Fighter, they released Street Fighter 2 again for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Street Fighter 2 originally came out for the SNES in 1991, but to celebrate the 30th anniversary of Street Fighter, the franchise of Street Fighter, obviously Street Fighter 2 can't be 30 years old because it's 2017 and 1991 was not 30 years ago. 1987 was 30 years ago, which is very sad to think about. But yeah, the Street Fighter came out in the arcades in 1987, the first Street Fighter, which was god-awful. It is a terrible game. But it paved the way for fighters, arguably, and Street Fighter 2 was the first good fighting game of all time, and is still held up well. So to celebrate 30th anniversary of Street Fighter, Capcom released a special edition cartridge for the Super Nintendo, which means a game company released a quote-unquote new game for an old discontinued system. And that got me so happy because I have been wanting for years. I thought it would be a good idea for the past several years, actually. It would be so cool if Nintendo, for instance, let's use Nintendo for instance, in the old NES from the 80s, it would be so cool if Nintendo licensed and released a new game, let's say in 2017, if they released a new game for the NES, meaning they printed more cartridges, they shipped more cartridges in physical boxes, physical cartridge, but a brand new game for the old Nintendo Entertainment System. I think that would work. I think that would sell reasonably well, at least. I think they would at least break even and use it for lots of promotion, like for the other things. Like obviously they're going to want to keep selling their current generation of consoles, the Switch mainly. They don't have any incentive to go exclusively, obviously not to make new games for old systems, but it would be super, super cool to release, let's say, a new Super Mario Brothers game for their old NES. Let me tell you why that would work, because I know a lot of you are out there rolling your eyes thinking, Johnny, you are so stupid. That will never work. No one's going to buy it because it's on a cartridge. It takes more money to create a cartridge, which means the game's going to be more expensive than what you can get on a DVD or just download from Steam or just download from Microsoft. No one's going to do that. Well, first of all, games cost $60, $70 back in the 80s. Adjust that for inflation. I don't know what the figure is. Over $100. So back in the 80s, we were spending lots of money on single games. Lots of money. They were expensive. And let's say Nintendo released a NES game in 2017 and they released it for $70. You'd think that's so much money compared to 1980s and adjusting for inflation. $70 in 2017 would be like spending, I don't know, $40 or so in 1980 on a game. So $70 for a physical cartridge on the NES. There might be people willing to do that. And which brings me to my next point. Why, Johnny? Why would they be willing to do that? No, they won't. That's a stupid idea. Vinyl records. Vinyl records. Yes, I grabbed the microphone and I ate the mic, and you can see me do that on YouTube. Vinyl records have been selling like hotcakes since 2012-13. In fact, vinyl records is the only medium of music that's seeing increasing sales. Now, of course, MP3s and downloads have vinyl beat. But the fact remains that vinyl, for the first time since the 80s, is a growing market. It is growing exponentially. Vinyls are becoming more and more popular every single year. Look up your favorite artist. Go look up Adele on Amazon. She's releasing new albums on vinyl. All of your favorite artists now are releasing their new albums on vinyl, on records, not even on cassette tapes, which cassettes are also, to a lesser extent, seeing a resurgence. But people love the nostalgia. We have gotten so disenchanted by playing video games on our phones, touching a screen with no tactile controls. We've gotten so disenchanted with just downloading an MP3 onto our phone and listening to it that way. It's very convenient and it's very cool and it's very good that we have that technology, obviously. But with certified scientific provable data, we have seen that people love this vintage stuff. They love purchasing music on vinyl so they can have the big poster art, they can have the big album art, they can physically hold what they've purchased in their hands, and the whole act of putting the record down onto a record player and listening to it through a good record player, it satisfies something in us that we are willing to pay a premium for the privilege of listening to a vinyl, because vinyl records often cost way more than just downloading the album for $9.99 or whatever. People will pay $15 for a vinyl, $20, $30. It is not uncommon to see a new release on vinyl for $50 and see it's selling like hotcakes. That is why people, I think, will be willing to spend top dollar if Nintendo officially released and licensed a new game for the old Nintendo Entertainment System, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, the N64 might be too recent, that might not work, but the NES and Super NES, specifically because pixel art is becoming so popular. I'll leave a dramatic pause there. You download games for your iPhone, and you download games for your PS4, and you download games for your PC that are developed to look like old Nintendo games. Some of them are 8-bit through and through. They are developed with 8-bit engines completely, or 16-bit engines completely. So people love that nostalgia effect, and you can call it BS all you want, but again, like I said, look at vinyl sales. They're going like this. If you're looking at my arms on the YouTube, seeing my hand go up, vinyl sales have been rising steadily over the past few years, 5 years especially. There's a market there. I know that if Nintendo, I don't care what the game was, I know that if Nintendo released a game for the NES, I would go out and buy it. And I would spend up to $100, I'll just say it, for that game, because it's going to be so cool that they released a new game for the old Nintendo. That is going to be amazing. Now, I'll mention this real quick. The cost of manufacturing would be higher. The simple fact remains is that the old ROM chips that they used for the original NES and Super NES, I'll just use the Super NES for example, those old ROM chips operated at 5 volts. And those 5-volt ROM chips are not so readily available. Obviously, they're not being mass-produced anymore, so they cost a lot of money. So, for instance, what Capcom did to re-release Street Fighter II on the Super Nintendo, they had to use 3-volt ROM chips, and they had to introduce circuitry into the cartridge that would up the voltage, basically, to 5 volts. There's a warning on that cartridge that says, warning, play this cartridge, this new cartridge in your old Super Nintendo at your own risk, because the Super Nintendo can get hot due to all the voltage manipulation and can possibly burst into flames. That hasn't happened. That likely won't happen, but there's still a risk of converting those voltages in the cartridges. So one thing that if Nintendo wanted to release a game for the NES in any sort of mass, which they wouldn't do anyways, they would have to source those 5-volt ROM chips again. But it's Nintendo, it's a big company. Could you imagine them releasing a new, I said Mario game. I'll just stick with that, like a new Mario game, a brand new Mario game in 2017 for the NES? It'll work, and it'll sell. Another reason why it will sell, and you're wondering, who's still playing NESs anymore? Have you seen how many vintage video game shops keep popping up? There are so many vintage video game shops, and old NESs are fetching a higher price because people are pulling those NESs out of their attics. They're going to their grandma's house, their mom's house. They're 34 years old like me, and they yearn because their lives are so stressful and chaotic. They yearn for those simpler times. So they pull out their old Nintendos, and they play Nintendos. It's kind of like dudes in their 50s and 60s buying their old cars that they love from their childhood because now they can. So I think people in their 30s and 40s who grew up playing the Nintendo would pay for a new NES game in 2017. And I was so happy that Capcom did it. Capcom was the first one to officially license an official game for an old Nintendo system. That is awesome. That is awesome. And with that, that's the end of Geek Therapy Radio for this week. Thank you so much, my geeks, for sticking around. Love somebody. Love yourself. Treat your fellow geeks well. And Greeks. If you meet a Greek person, treat them well too. Once again, I'm still so proud of my city for their response to Hurricane Harvey. It's amazing. Continue to love your neighbor. Please continue to love your neighbor, and please continue to love yourself. You're capable of so much. You're capable of receiving mercy. You are worthy of that. So if someone shows you mercy, just receive it. And don't think I'm so terrible I don't deserve the mercy. Take the mercy. Someone offers you mercy, take it. So that's it. That's it for Geek Therapy Radio this week. Geek Therapy Radio on Facebook, Geek Therapy Radio on Instagram, and Geek Therapy Radio on YouTube. Go subscribe to it. Thanks, my geeks. I'll see you next week.